There are lots of ways to turn a profit from an app. One of the most common and effective ones is in-app advertisement. Google is by far the biggest player in the online advertising game. Google AdMob is a service that provides highly personalized ads from over 1 million advertisers along with useful tools and analytics to be used in apps. Integrating Google AdMob into your Flutter apps is absolutely free and, as you'll learn in this tutorial, really simple. Hello everyone, my name is Ashley and welcome to ResoCoder. Our goal here is to provide top-level education and teach you the skills needed to become an in-demand Flutter developer. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss a single video. Let's get started. Let's take a look at the app we're going to have at the end of this tutorial. Earlier this year, Google announced the release of a new Google Mobile Ads for Flutter plugin. This is the plugin we're going to use to set up the AdMob ads in this lesson. At the end of this tutorial, we're going to have a mock news app which will display several ads. The ad formats we're going to display will be banner and interstitial. If we take a look at the finished app over here, you can see we've got an ad at the bottom of the screen. This is a banner ad that stays at the bottom of the screen, always visible to the user even as we scroll through the page. Then, here, we have another banner ad. This ad shows up at the position we specify within our list of news articles. The last ad our finished project will have is an interstitial ad. An interstitial ad is displayed as a full screen overlay. When we tap on any of the news articles, we will see this ad. This is a video ad that we can dismiss after 5 seconds. When the ad is dismissed, we will see the news article page. And be sure to check out the written tutorial from the link in the description, where you can also find all of the code written in this video and go through this lesson at your own pace. In this tutorial, we'll be working with a starter project. It'll have all of the UI elements of the news app pre-made for you, so we can just focus on implementing the ads. So if you want to follow along, remember to grab the starter project from the written tutorial. Let's take a look at how this project is set up so we know exactly what's going on. First, let's take a look at the main.dart file. Here, we've just got an app widget, which returns a material app, and the material app has our homepage widget as its home argument. To make the lib folder a little bit tidier, we split up the remaining app files into 2 folders, data and presentation. Let's take a look at the data folder first. All we've got here is a news article.dart file. And all this file has is a news article class that takes in a goofy news headline just for fun and an image path into its constructor. This class also has a static field which contains a list of news article objects. We're using this list to display the mock news articles in our app. The image paths we're using here are for the images located inside of the assets folder. Now let's take a look at the presentation folder. Over here, we've got 3 files. In the homepage.dart file, we have a stateful homepage widget, which returns a scaffold with an app bar and a list view builder in the body. This list view builder is what we're using to display these news article tiles. Over here, we're accessing individual news article objects from the static list we just looked at using the current index provided to us by the item builder function. Then we're displaying a custom article tile widget wrapped inside of a gesture detector. And when we tap on the news articles, we are taken to the news article page. So now let's take a look at the news article page.dart file. Over here, we have a stateless widget which accepts a string title and image path through its constructor. This page will dynamically display the article image and headline depending on what article tile from the homepage was tapped. We won't be working with this page at all, it's just here for visual purposes. Lastly, we have a Widgets.Dart file. This file has 2 custom widgets, and its main purpose is to declutter our homepage widget tree. So here we've got an app bar title and also the article tile, which we use to display these article tiles over here. Before we move on to the next topic, let's add the Google Mobile Ads plugin as a dependency to our pubspec.yaml. Let's go to the pubspec.yaml, and then over here under the Flutter dependency, let's add Google Mobile Ads. And we're using the latest version at the time, version 0.13.3. And let's save that. And as always, be mindful if you are watching this in the future of any potential breaking changes. Next, we're going to go over creating and setting up your AdMob account. Head over to admob.google.com and sign up if you don't have an AdMob account, or sign in if you do. You will need a Google account to create an AdMob one. Once you're signed up, you will be taken to your user dashboard. If you created a brand new account, then from here you can click Get Started or go to Apps in the left sidebar and then click Add Your First App. From here, you can create an Android or an iOS app. Since we're using Flutter, you will probably want to create an app for each platform. The steps for creating both kinds of apps are exactly the same. For our simple demonstration, we're just going to create an Android app, but you can go ahead and create one for iOS as well. Here, you'll be asked if your app is listed on a supported app store. If it isn't, you can select No. Then click Continue. Now, you can choose a name for your app. We'll just call it Test App. Over here, you can also choose whether or not you want to use metrics. If you want to increase your chance of success with AdMob, I would suggest for you to opt in. Metrics can be used to understand aggregated user behavior in your app, such as average session duration and number of active users for a given time period. Metrics will also provide you with average revenue per user along with other useful data. The more data you have, the better and more educated decisions you can make about how and where you display your ads. Once you click Add App, you'll be all done. Just remember that your app needs to go through Google's approval process before it can show any ads. Next, we're going to go over creating an ad unit. When your app is in development, you should always use test ad units instead of real ads. I cannot stress enough how important this is. If you were to use real ads instead of test ones, then every time you click on an ad, the advertisers would be charged for that click. If you click on the ads too many times, then Google will flag your account for invalid activity, and you risk being penalized for this. So even though we'll be using test ad units in this tutorial, I will still teach you how you can create your own ad units that you can use in a production app. You should create a separate ad unit for every activity or location in your app where you want to display the ads. This is best practice because it will allow you to track the performance of every ad unit. An ad unit sends requests to AdMob for ads and then displays them in your app. For every app, you should have a separate set of ad units. So if you have an iOS and an Android app, and you want to display a banner ad, you need to create a banner ad unit for each app. So select either an iOS or an Android app through the Apps menu. We only have an Android app here. And now either click on Add Ad Unit or go to Add Units and click Get Started. Now from here, you can select an ad format for the ad unit you're creating. You can choose from a variety of ad units here. In our project, we'll be using banner and interstitial ads. The setup process is pretty much the same for all ad formats except for the rewarded ads. When you create a rewarded ad unit, you can specify the reward amount and reward item name which the user receives after watching the ad. For this demo, go ahead and select Banner. Now from here, you can give your ad unit a name. We'll just name it Test Ad Unit. And you can also change any advanced settings if necessary. When you click Create Ad Unit, you'll be all done. When you create an ad unit, it may take up to an hour for it to start displaying ads. At the end of the setup, you will see an app ID and an ad unit ID. These are the values you will use in your production app. In this tutorial, we'll go over where you need to add these IDs in your Flutter project. Also, if you want to reference these values in the future, you can go to Apps and view all apps to get the app IDs. And to get the ad unit IDs, you can choose a specific app. So here we've got the Android app selected, and go to Ad Units. Now that you know how to create apps and ad units in your AdMob account, we can configure our Flutter project so it's able to display ads. First, let's take care of the iOS configuration. So head over to iOS, Runner, and open up the info.plist file. And here you're going to need to add some code. I'm just going to paste a snippet over here right below this dict tag under the plist tag. And you can find this snippet in the written tutorial through the link in the description. So here we have a GAD application identifier, and it holds a string. And this string is meant to be your app ID for the iOS app you created in your AdMob account. For this lesson, we're using Google's sample app ID here. The other thing we're added here is the SK Ad network identifier, which holds a string as well. And this string is not specific to your AdMob account, so you can leave it as is. That's all for the iOS configuration. Let's take care of the Android one next. To configure the Android app, first we need to make sure that the Min SDK version is 19 or higher to prevent us from getting an error. To do this, go to Android app and this build.gradle file over here. Now scroll down to the bottom to find the Min SDK version over here. And as you can see, we have it set to 16. So we just want to change this to 19 and save this. Next, we need to add a code snippet to the Androidmanifest.xml file. This file is located in Android, App, Source, Main, and here it is, the Androidmanifest.xml. So I'm going to paste this code at the bottom of the file right before this closing application tag. You can also find this snippet in the written tutorial. So this is a meta tag, and the string over here should be the app ID for the Android app you created in your AdMob account. Just like in the iOS setup, I'm using a sample app ID from Google here. And we're all done. The last thing we need to do is initialize the mobile ads SDK. Head over to the main.dart file and we're going to add some code right above this run app over here. So first we're going to say widgets flutter binding dot ensure initialized, and right below that we're going to say mobile ads, and make sure to import the package here, dot instance dot initialize. And that's it. Next, we're going to create a class that will help us fetch the appropriate ad unit ID based on the ad format we want and the platform the app is running on. As we discussed earlier, in this project, we'll be using test ads. And when developing, you should always be using test ads. There are two ways you can set them up for your project. One is to designate the device you're testing on as a test device, and this way is more complicated. The other way is to use Google's designated test ad unit IDs. That's the IDs we'll be using in this project. Since we're only showing banner and interstitial ads for this app, that's the only kinds of ad unit IDs we'll need. If you want to use test ad units for other ad formats, you can find the links to them in the written tutorial from the link in the video description. Since our Flutter app can run on both iOS and Android, we want to be able to dynamically fetch the appropriate ad unit IDs to our widgets. To make this really easy and clean, we're going to create an ad helper class. So let's go to the data folder. Actually, we can close all of these files too. Let's go to the data folder and create a new file here. We're going to name it adhelper.dart. And here we can use a handy class file snippet to create a class matching our file name. Now we want this class to have two static getters, one for getting the banner ad unit ID and the other for getting the interstitial ad unit ID. Let's create the one for the banner ad first. So we're going to say static, and it's going to get a string for us, get banner ad unit ID. And here we want to check which platform we're currently on. So if platform, and make sure you don't import platform from Dart HTML. Instead, just add period is Android. And now you can go here and make sure you import this platform from Dart.io. So if it is an Android device we're on, then we want to return the following string. And this string is the ad unit ID from Google. So this is a test ad unit, and you can get this and the other test ad units we're using from the written tutorial. Okay, great. Now we want to provide the iOS ad unit. So else if platform.isIOS, we want to return the following ad unit ID. Okay. And lastly, if it's neither of these platforms somehow, we want to say else, and we're going to throw unsupported error. And we don't need, and we can put a message in here, unsupported platform. That's it. Now we want to do the exact same thing, but for our interstitial ad. So we can honestly just copy this here and then change this name to interstitial ad unit ID, and then change this unit ID for the Android one for the interstitial ad, and this one for the iOS one for the interstitial ad. And now we can save this. The ad unit we're using here, or the ad units we're using here, are set up to display a video interstitial ad. And that's it. Now we can finally get to setting up the ads. First, we're going to add a bottom banner ad. So let's set up our first ad. This will be a banner ad that will be displayed at the bottom of the screen. First, we need to add some variables and functions that will be responsible for the logic of displaying the ad. Let's head over to the homepage.dart file. And we can close that. And now let's create a late variable that will hold the reference to the banner ad. So let's scroll up here. And then over here, we're going to say late. It's going to be of type banner ad. and make sure you import the Google mobile ads package. And we're going to name it bottom banner ad. We will initialize this variable in a function we will create soon. Next, we want to be able to check if the ad is loaded before displaying it. So let's create a variable of type bool for this. And let's do it like this. So bool. We'll call it is bottom banner ad loaded. And initially, we're going to set it to false. That's because when the page loads, the ad won't be loaded right away. Now, let's create a function that will create and load the banner ad when it's called. So this function is going to return void, and we're going to call it create bottom banner ad. When this function is called, we want to set the bottom banner ad variable we just created with a banner ad object. And here we want to provide several things to this banner ad object constructor, one of which is an ad unit ID. And here we're going to use the ad helper class we created earlier to provide the banner ad unit ID. So we're going to say ad helper and make sure you import the ad helper class here. So ad helper dot banner ad unit ID. Next, we want to specify the size for this ad. And we're going to use ad size dot banner here. And if you take a look, actually, you can provide different sizes here depending on what size you want your ad to be. We're going to use banner, and banner is going to display an ad that is size 320 by 50 display pixels. And to see what the other ad sizes are, you can check out the PubDev plugin page. All right. Next, we need to provide an ad request to the request argument. And this object will actually go ahead and request the ad. And here we're going to leave this empty, but you can also provide a list of keywords if you want to request keyword-specific ads. Then we're going to provide a banner ad listener object to the listener argument to listen to the ad's lifecycle events and perform some logic when they occur. So banner ad listener. First, we're going to set a callback for when an ad is loaded. So we're going to use the onAd loaded argument for that. And here we need to provide a function. We don't need the parameter here, so we can just put an underscore. And here, when the ad loads, we want to set the is bottom banner ad loaded variable to true. So we're going to say set state, and then set the is bottom banner ad loaded to true. We also want to listen to when an ad fails to load using the on ad failed to load listener. And here we're going to get an ad and an error object. And what we want to do now is call Dispose on this ad when the ad fails to load. So we're going to say add.dispose. And you should always remember to call Dispose over here in this listener. So that's everything we're going to listen to for this ad, but in your own apps, you can also listen to other events, such as when an ad is opened, closed, or when it receives an impression. The last thing we're going to do in this function is, after setting this variable with this banner ad object, is we're going to load the ad. So we're going to say bottom banner ad dot load. And this method will load the ad. Then when the ad loads, our onAdLoaded listener callback will fire off, and it will set the is bottom banner ad loaded to true. And then we'll be ready to display the ad in our page. Now we can call this function we just created from the init state of the home page state. So let's go over here and say init state delete this line. And then over here, we can just call create bottom banner ad. Perfect. And that's because we want the ad to load when the page loads. So the one last thing we're going to do is we need to dispose of the ad we create. So we're going to do that in the dispose method of the homepage state. So we're going to say dispose and override the dispose method here. And then below here, we're going to use our bottom banner ad and then call dispose on it. And that's it. Now let's incorporate this ad into our widget tree. So let's scroll down a bit. And we want this ad to be displayed at the bottom of the screen. So there are two easy ways we could set this up. One is we can provide our ad widget to the bottom navigation bar argument of the scaffold. And this works great if you don't have a bottom nav, but if you do have one, you can use persistent footer buttons argument instead. And if you use this argument, then the ad is going to show up above the bottom navigation bar. So our app doesn't have a bottom nav, so we're just going to use the bottom navigation bar here. And the first thing we want to do is we want to check to make sure the ad is loaded before displaying it. So we're going to use our isBottomBannerAdLoaded variable here. And if it is true, which means the ad is loaded, we want to display the ad. So you want to make sure you wrap this ad widget in a container with a fixed height and width. If you don't do this, the ad is going to take up the entire screen. So we're going to return a container here. And then if the ad is not loaded, we're going to set this argument to null. And this is great because the bottom navigation bar value is null by default. So we're just not going to see anything if the ad is not loaded. Now let's provide a height to our container. And we're going to use the add size property to get the height. So we're going to use our bottom banner ad, get its size, and from here we're going to get the height. We're going to do this, and also we need to actually convert this to a double because by default this height property is an int. Next, we're going to provide the width in the same type of way. So bottom banner ad dot size dot width dot to double. And the last thing we're going to do here is provide the child. And the child is going to be an ad widget. Now to this ad widget, we need to provide our ad. So this is going to be our bottom banner ad. Awesome. And that is pretty much it. So I'm going to terminate this app right here, save, and relaunch this app. And there you go. So now you should see the ad appearing at the bottom here. And even if you're scrolling through the list, it still stays at the bottom, visible to the user. Perfect. So we're all done with this banner ad. And next we're going to add another banner ad, but this time it's going to show up in between these article tiles. Showing an inline banner ad is going to require a few extra steps, but once we break it down, you'll see how simple it is. First, let's create a variable to represent the index at which we want the ad to be displayed within the list view. So let's scroll up here, and then right above this bottom banner ad variable, let's add final inline ad index, and we're going to set it to 3. Then, like before, we're going to create a late variable which will hold the reference to the inline banner ad. So we can add it right below this one. So late, it's going to be of type banner ad again, and we're going to call it inline banner ad. Lastly, to check whether or not the ad is loaded, let's create a bool variable and initially set it to false, just like we did over here. So bool, we're going to call it is inline banner ad loaded, and set it to false. Now, just like for the bottom banner ad, we need to create a function that will create and load the ad. So let's add it below this one. It's going to return void, and we're going to call it create inline banner ad. And here we're going to set the inline banner ad variable to a banner ad object. And here we're going to provide the ad unit ID using the ad helper class. So because this is a simple demonstration, we're using the same banner ad unit ID we used for the bottom banner ad, but in production, you should have separate ad unit IDs for every placement or activity in your app. As I mentioned before, this is really beneficial because you can track the performance of the individual ad units. All right, then let's provide a size. And for this ad, we're going to specify a different size. Ad size dot medium rectangle. This will display an ad that is 320 by 250 display pixels. Then we need to provide an ad request, just like we did before. All right. And also set up the listeners. So banner ad listener. This is pretty much the same as the way we did it before. And here we need to provide the on ad loaded callback. We're not going to use the value in here. And here all we want to do is set state and set the is inline banner ad loaded to true when the ad loads. Then we want to set the on ad fail to load callback. And over here, we get access to an add object and an error object through this callback. And all we want to do here is dispose, call dispose on this ad to free up some resources. Now let's add some commas over here for some nice formatting. And at the end of this function, after we've initialized this variable, we want to call load on our banner ad. So inline banner ad dot load, and that's it for this function. Now, just like we did for the bottom banner ad, we want to call this function from within the init state. So let's do that right below here. So create inline banner ad, and then we also want to dispose of this ad to free up the resources when they're no longer needed. So inline banner ad dot dispose, and that's it. So now let's work on inserting this ad into the list view. We only want to display this ad when it's loaded. So let's change up the current list view builder implementation to account for this ad. So let's scroll down to our list view builder, which is right here. And first, let's modify the item count. If the ad is loaded, then it will be added as an item into the list view. Right now, our item count is defined by the length of the list of news articles. So if we show an ad, then the item count will be increased by 1. So then let's add if is inline banner ad loaded, we want to return 1, otherwise 0. So what's happening here is if the inline banner ad is loaded, then we're going to add 1 to this value. And if it's not loaded, we're going to add 0. So it's just going to stay at this value. Awesome. Now let's move on to the item builder function. So this one over here. And here we want to display an ad widget if the current index, this index over here, is equal to the index where we want to display the ad which is this index we defined up here, and also if the ad is loaded. So let's say if is inline banner ad loaded and index, which is this index right here, is equal to inline ad index, then we want to return the ad widget wrapped in a container. So return container, and we're going to give this container some padding because it's going to be displayed within this list view of article tiles. So we want to make sure there's some spacing between the ad and the next article tile. So we're going to say padding edge insets dot only, and here we're going to give a bottom padding of 10, and that's it. Next, we're going to give this container a width using the size property of our ad. So inline banner ad dot size dot width dot to double, just like we did in the other ad. And then we're also going to give it a height. So inline banner ad dot size dot height dot to double. Easy. And then we're going to provide a child to this container, which will be an ad widget. So everything you've already seen before. And to this ad widget, we're going to provide our inline banner ad. And let's save this. If these conditions return false, we want to display an article tile and not the ad. So then let's wrap all of the remaining logic here for displaying the article tiles inside of an else block. Let's find where this ends. Wrap it inside of some curly braces. Whoops. And then add else here. Save. And there you go. And we're almost done, but there's one last issue we need to take care of. If you take a look over here, we're getting the individual news article objects from this list using the current index provided to us by the item builder function. The problem arises when we display an ad and the item count in the list view builder increases by 1. So let's say we get a third news article. So let's say in this list view, we get this third news article over here, and which is located at the index number 2. Then the next index is 3. 3 happens to be the index where we want to display our ad. So here, the item builder will display the ad based on this logic we've defined. The next index provided by the item builder will be 4. Our else block will execute with the index being 4, and that will get us the 5th news article. But that's an issue because we actually want the 4th news article, since the last article we displayed was the 3rd one. So let's create a simple function that will return the correct index that we can use here to get the correct news articles. So let's scroll up to the top above all of these other functions we've created here. And over here, let's add a function that returns an integer. We're going to call it getListView item index, and it's going to accept an integer. We're going to call this index. And here we want to check if index, which is this index over here, and this is the index we'll get from the item builder, is greater than or equal to inline ad index, which is 3 in our case, and is inline banner ad loaded is true. So if this, all of this returns true, we want to return the index decremented by 1. So if the ad is loaded and the index provided by the item builder is greater than or equal to the inline ad index, then we want to return the index decremented by 1. In the example scenario I spoke of previously, if the index we get from the item builder here is 4, then this function will return 3, and that will get us the 4th news article. Awesome. So if this condition returns false, then we want the function to return the unmodified index. So return index. We want the unmodified index if the ad isn't loaded, or if we're trying to get the news article objects that have the index value of less than 3, meaning they are the articles displayed before the ad. So that's all for this function. Now let's go back to the else block and call it from there. Let's scroll all the way down. Here's our else block. And now here, instead of index, we want to change this to get list view item index. And then here, pass in this index, which we're getting from the item builder function over here. Awesome. That's it for the inline banner ad. So let's save our work, restart the app, and scroll down. And there you go. Our ad shows up exactly where we intended it to. Next, we're going to implement an interstitial ad. Now that we know how to display banner ads in 2 different places in our app, let's advance our skills and implement an interstitial ad. Due to the nature of interstitial ads, the implementation will look pretty different from banner ads. Interstitial ads are displayed as a full screen overlay. As best practice, you want to place these ads at natural transition points within your app. You shouldn't display these ads when a user is in the middle of an important task, because that will just end up frustrating them. So remember to always prioritize the user experience. For our app, we want to see one of these ads when we tap on a news article tile before we show the news article. This will be a video interstitial ad, and after 5 seconds, the user can dismiss it. When the ad is dismissed, the article page will become visible. We will break down the setup into 2 parts. In the first part, we'll load and create an interstitial ad, and in the second part, we'll set up the logic for showing the ad. So first, let's create a nullable variable that will hold the reference to our ad. So let's scroll up over here, and right below these 2 reference variables, let's add a variable that will be of type interstitial ad. It'll be nullable, and we're going to call it interstitial ad. Now we need to create a function that will load the ad and initialize the variable we just created. So let's scroll down over here below these 2 functions. And here where it's going to return void, and we're going to call it create interstitial ad. So for interstitial ads, instead of creating an interstitial ad object like we created a banner ad object over here, and then initialize the banner ad variable with it, we need to call load on the interstitial ad class. So let's do that. So interstitial ad dot load. And here we can provide several things. So here we provide our ad unit ID. So using the ad helper class dot, and we're going to use the interstitial ad unit ID. Then the ad request. So this is similar to what we've done before. And over here, we're going to need to set up the ad load callback and set up the logic for what needs to happen when an ad loads or when an ad fails to load. So here we're going to provide a interstitial ad load callback. And let's format this and go back here. So when an ad loads, we're going to specify the on ad loaded argument. And here we're going to provide a function. This function, or this callback, gives us access to an ad object, which is going to be the interstitial ad that gets loaded. And what we want to do here is initialize our interstitial ad variable with this object. So let's do just that. So interstitial ad equals this ad object we get here. Now let's set up the logic for when an ad fails to load. So we're going to add a comma here on ad failed to load. And here we get a error object. Now, it's important to note that every interstitial ad you load can only be shown once. So when an ad fails to load, we want to set the interstitial ad variable to null. That's because when we load one ad, we populate this variable with an ad object, like we do here. If we show that previously loaded ad and then try to load another one, but that new ad fails to load, we don't want to attempt to show the previous ad. So to prevent this from happening, we set this variable to null when the ad fails to load. Next, if an ad fails to load, we would like to try and load another ad. So we can just call create interstitial ad from the onAdFailToLoad callback. Now, please note that this is not the optimal way of requesting an ad from here, because we could end up calling this function indefinitely in case of an unresolvable failure. So to prevent this from becoming an issue, we want to limit the amount of times we try to reload an ad in case of a failure. To set this up, let's first create a constant for the maximum number of times we want to reattempt to load an ad. So let's go up to the top. We can create this constant outside of our class. And it's going to be const int. We're going to call it max failed load attempts. And we're going to set it to 3. Then let's add a variable to keep track of how many times we reattempted loading the ad. So we can scroll down here and let's add it over here. So we're going to call it int interstitial load attempts. And we're going to set it to 0 since in the beginning we would have reattempted 0 times. Now let's go back to our create interstitial ad function over here. And here, every time an ad fails to load, we want to increment the interstitial load attempts by 1. So we can do that over here. So interstitial load attempts plus equals 1. Then we want to execute this function conditionally. So let's wrap this in curly braces and then say if the interstitial load attempts are greater than or equal, are greater than or equal to the max failed load attempts, which in our case is 3, then and only then we want to attempt to load a new ad. If the load attempts exceed 3, then we don't want to execute this function anymore since something is probably seriously wrong. The last thing we want to do here is to reset the interstitial load attempts in case an ad loads successfully. So let's go up here, and then here, if the ad did load successfully, we can then set the interstitial load attempts to 0. Now let's call this function from init state because we want this ad to be loaded and ready to be displayed even before the function to show it is triggered. So let's go down to our init state and over here, create interstitial ad. And the last thing we're going to do here is call Dispose on this ad from the Dispose method, just like we've been doing with the other ads. So interstitial ad, and it's a nullable variable, so we have to put this null safe operator here, and then call Dispose. Awesome. Now that we're all done with this, let's implement the logic for showing the ad. We're going to create a separate function responsible for showing the interstitial ad. So let's go up here, and then right after this function, we'll create it. So it's going to return void, and we're going to call it show interstitial ad. We only want to execute the logic in this function if the ad is loaded. So we're going to say if interstitial ad does not equal null, then we're going to do some stuff. Then we need to configure the interstitial ad's full screen content callback property with a full screen content callback object. This will allow us to listen and respond to the ad's lifecycle events. So let's do just that. So interstitial ad, and we need to use this bang operator here. Dot full screen content callback equals full screen content callback. Let's scroll down a bit. So in our case, we only care about when an ad is either dismissed or when an ad fails to show full screen content. So let's take care of the on ad dismissed full screen content first. And here we've got a callback function, and here we have access to an interstitial ad object. So add. Let's go back here. So when the ad is dismissed, we want to call Dispose on the ad, and then we want to call the create interstitial ad function to load a new ad. So let's do that. So we're going to use this ad object we get here, so add.dispose. And then we want to call the create interstitial ad function. If you recall, this is because an interstitial ad can only be shown once. So when we dismiss an ad, it means we showed one, and now we want to dispose of the old one and load a new one. Then we're going to specify a callback for the on ad failed to show full screen content. One scenario when this event could occur is if somehow we try to load an ad that was already shown. So here we actually get access to two things, the interstitial ad object and also an add error object. So here we want to dispose of the ad and then also request to load a new one. So let's do just that, add.dispose, and then call the create interstitial ad function here as well. It is important to remember to call dispose from both of these listener callbacks. And you have more events that you can listen to. For example, you can listen to when an ad receives an impression, but we're going to stick to these two for our app. The last thing we're going to do here is call the show method on our ad. So we're going to say interstitial ad, and we need to use the bang operator here because it's a nullable variable, and we're going to call show. That's it. So all this function does is configure the listener callbacks and then shows the interstitial ad. That's it for this function and all of the logic. Now let's go to the gesture detector that wraps our article tiles and call the show interstitial ad function from there. So let's scroll down, and this is our gesture detector, and this is the onTap function. So here, right before the navigator.push, we can add the show interstitial ad function call. So now when a user clicks on the tile, they will see the ad. Let's save our work and restart the app. So let's see this in action. Let's click on this article and we see our ad. The countdown over here starts from 5 seconds, and when the 5 seconds are up, we see this X and we can click on it to dismiss the ad. When the ad is dismissed, we see the article page. Now when we go back, after showing that ad, we request a new one, so we can click on another article and we see another ad. And again, after 5 seconds, we can dismiss this. Amazing. So one more thing I want to add, if you want to implement rewarded ads into your app, you're in luck because rewarded ads setup is nearly identical to that of interstitial ads. The main difference is a callback you need to configure to specify what happens when the user earns a reward. So if you check out the official plugin example on pub.dev, you can see how it's done. And this concludes our tutorial. You now know how to set up your AdMob account, implement bottom and inline banner ads, as well as interstitial ads. Remember though, placing ads into your code is just one part of successful app monetization. How and where you display your ads plays a major role in your ultimate results. So make sure you do your research on how to strategically and effectively display ads in your app. And don't forget to monitor your ad performance and make use of all the helpful data Google provides you with. To go through this tutorial at your own pace once again, and to get all the code, check out the written tutorial available from the link in the description. And if you're serious about becoming a great Flutter developer who can build real apps for clients or at a job, go to flutter.education to get the top curated Flutter news and resources aimed at improving your app development career. Over there, you can also subscribe to the mailing list to get the best Flutter resources delivered weekly right into your inbox. And if you don't want to miss more tutorials like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel and join the notification squad by hitting the bell button to make sure you grow your Flutter skills, because here at ResoCoder, we are determined to provide you with the best tutorials and resources so that you will become an in-demand Flutter developer. Like the video if it helped you, leave a comment, and see you in the next video.